And hello, everybody. Welcome to the Weekday Warriors of Wrestling, being recorded on Friday, September 25th, 2020. So we just got in for that Weekday Warrior definition, but I'm Erik Clancy. I'm joined by Patrick Kelley. We're going to be talking AEW, NXT, WWE. Today, we're going to be talking Clash of Champions. We're going to be talking Dynamite. We're going to be talking Raw. So stay tuned and give us a listen. And make sure that you click like and subscribe on the YouTube video. Really helps us out, and we definitely appreciate it. So let's jump right in, Pat. I know we normally start with AEW and NXT. I'd say since we're closer to the pay-per-view, why don't we start with Clash of the Champions? Is it Clash of Champions or is it Clash of the Champions now?
I think it's Clash of Champions.
Yes, it is. It's funny because you'd think they would do it so they don't lose rights to because Cody tries to buy every trademark ever. So you'd think they would do that, but they don't. So this is happening on Sunday in the Amway Center, in WWE's residency at the Amway Center. And we've got 8 matches and a pre-show match. They don't look great, but let's go through and let's talk about them. We've got, in what seems to be, Patrick, an endless amount of matches for the United States title match. It's Bobby Lashley and Apollo Crews.
I don't watch WWE programming every single week, and I still feel like I've seen this match 20 times.
I feel like there's been an endless series of matches between Bobby Lashley, Apollo Crews, Cedric Alexander, and MVP and Shelton Benjamin for a summer.
They're the new version of Crime Time in the Hart Dynasty. Or Dolph Ziggler and Kofi Kingston.
Yeah, Dolph Ziggler and Kofi Kingston is my go-to for a match that happened every day in 2010. Or The Miz and Kofi Kingston was another one. There's those endless matches. This is the issue. When you have 7 billion hours of programming, you will inevitably run through your matches super quickly. People make fun of Nitro or WCW because they're they have so many talents on staff, and they're yeah, but you don't see the same match every week. They would always trot out Jerry Flynn or fucking Fit Finley for some reason. Yeah. Someone weird, or Roadblock would come out one week. And I mean, WWE has that roster, but they also have 10 million times the programming, even more than WCW did. WWE is so much bigger.
And speaking as someone who just recently rewatched Nitro from 95 to 98, I can say that you didn't really start seeing those kind of problems creep up on Nitro until Thunder showed up. And then Nitro permanently got extended to 3 hours. Then all of a sudden, a lot of those big marquee matches started showing up on TV more and more. We talked about this last week. And they blew through everything. And there were other creative problems that got in their way as well. But that was a big one where it just became too much to handle for them, I think.
I like our running gag of talking about 1998 WCW out of nowhere. But by the way, where are you in that?
I just watched the last thing I watched was the Finger Poke of Doom.
Holy shit, you tore through that stuff quickly. You were at when my daughter was born 3 months ago, you were at Spring Stampede.
Yeah. You know what? When you're not going to work every day, it's easy. When you're not commuting, you have a lot more extra time, and I filled that with Monday Nitro.
Yeah. When you have a kid, it's been harder to do that. But I don't know who wins this. I guess Apollo Crews. Who knows?
They'll flip a coin the day of, I'm sure.
Yeah. We have this next match for the Raw Tag Team titles. This match seems to be another of these Dolph Ziggler, Kofi Kingston matches. It's the Street Profits versus Andrade and Angel Garza. I feel like we've had the Street Profits versus them, or I think Austin Theory was teaming with them for a while, for quite some time. It's also, by the way, so this show is it's Clash of Champions, but every WWE show has 90% title matches. Like, so for example, SummerSlam had, there were 7 matches, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them were for titles. If you want to count the pre-show match, there were 8 matches and 6 of them were for titles. So like, whoa, Clash of Champions has an extra 2 title matches.
And you run into this problem when you have 9 million belts. And especially, we're on the tag division right now. This is what happens. We've seen Street Profits and Andrade and Angel Garza so many times because they split the tag division in half. And this is not a new thing. They've been doing this ever since the brand split first started in 2002. And it's one of the reasons why tag team wrestling has been so hard for them to maintain, because they insist on having a Raw set of titles and a SmackDown set of titles. And I don't understand why. There's no purpose to it.
Yeah, it's the same with like the women's tag team titles. It's like, I mean, at least that can move around, but like they're like pretty much, you have to do that because they don't have enough like tag teams. I mean, like I can't even pretend to care about this match. Who cares?
Exactly.
Let's move through here. We've got Jeff Hardy, AJ Styles, and Sami Zayn in a triple threat ladder match for the Intercontinental Championship. I don't mean to be like a curmudgeon, but like, remember when ladder matches were like big deals and they happened for like major feuds and not just like on a fucking random pay-per-view in the middle of nowhere?
Back in my day, we had Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon fighting them ladder matches.
Well, no, even in my day, it sucked because in my day, we had like 10 million of those like Edge and Christian, Matt Hardy and Jeff Hardy matches, and they were good, but they happened way too goddamn often.
Sure.
So like, even my day sucked. But I mean, what the fuck is this?
The sad thing is, this one's actually better because I've gotten just sick and tired of like the 10-man, 12-man ladder matches.
Yeah, I agree.
And the casino ladder match, even that one, I'm just tired of it. So this one, it's like, all right, at least it's just 3 guys.
At least you can focus on something. Actually, you know what? The ladder matches kind of super suck now, and it's because, the casino ladder match one at Double or Nothing was like this too. Like, everybody's just setting up spots. Like, the whole time they're just setting up spots. And like, that's a consequence of the Edge and Christian Hardy Boys stuff. One of the things and it wasn't a ladder match, but it was a gimmick match where like this kind of stuff happens. Like, one of the things I liked about the parking lot brawl between Best Friends and Proud and Powerful was how like kinetic it felt. It didn't feel like people were setting up spots. I mean, they obviously were, because in a wrestling match you're going to set up spots. It happens, but it wasn't like obviously happening. You know what I mean? Like, it felt like it was moving forward and progressing and like moving to like a conclusion that made sense. And like so many of these ladder matches, you're like, oh, he's lying softly on the table and he's punching him, and like, okay, they're gonna do the next thing, and it's all about like doing cool stuff as opposed to getting the belt. Like Michaels and Razor and like Triple H and Rock, like, I mean, they did cool stuff with the ladder, but it's like in the context of grabbing the belt. You want them to get the title, and like, that's theoretically where the drama comes from if you can do it correctly. But like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I like seeing people like jump off shit too. Like, that's cool, I get it, but like, it's gotta be, it can't just be that, because if it is, and ever since I think Money in the Bank, that's kind of like how these things have evolved, where you're always like, I mean, you and I said this for years after like every WrestleMania that had a Money in the Bank, you're like, yeah, it was fun, there's nothing wrong with it. It like, people like fell through tables and shit, like, cool, but like, I mean, it wasn't.
You're not going to remember it in 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that. Do you remember the Raw like 10th anniversary in 2003? And they're like, the greatest match of Raw history was the 4-way ladder match that Hurricane and Kane won. And you're like, what? Nobody even remembered that match in 2004.
Was that the one that Hurricane got taken out of? So Kane won the tag titles by himself?
I think so.
Okay.
I think it was Hurricane and Kane, Christian and Jericho. I want to say the Dudley Boys, and I don't know who the 4th team was.
The greatest match in Raw history of the first decade. Sure it
Can
was.
you imagine saying that with the Bret Hart 1-2-3 Kid match with the Shawn and Austin versus Bulldog and Owen with the with like Kane and Austin with with all those, that Shawn Michaels Mankind match from September 97, like with all those matches, you're like, you picked fucking this one, like really?
I think that's just. I think at the time it was just a recency bias. It was fresh on their minds, and
Yeah.
that's. Because the fans voted for it, didn't they?
I mean, yeah, I guess so. All right. God, you know what? Let's go to the main events. I can hardly talk about any of these. I have so little interest in these that I can't talk about them. Roman Reigns versus Jey Uso. It's a singles match for the Universal Championship. Roman Reigns is with Paul Heyman, which is a choice that I like. Jey Uso as his first opponent is probably not a choice that I like. But I don't know, maybe he can do something heinous here and cripple Jey Uso to show a complete disconnect from his family. But I don't know. I guess the match could be fine. Right? I don't know.
I can see it as a solid character builder stepping stone for this new version of Roman Reigns, whatever it's going to be. They could have him do, like you said, they could have him do something where he just absolutely brutalizes Jey, and that fully solidifies him as not just a heel, but as a guy you don't want to mess with.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Roman will obviously go over.
I can see them doing a DQ where Jey wins by DQ, but Reigns gets DQ'd by beating the ever-living crap out of him.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry. What I mean to say is Reigns isn't losing the title.
No, not at all.
Nor should he. Then we have an ambulance match for McIntyre and Orton. I think it's pretty obvious to me Orton wins here because I think they've been gearing in that direction for a while. And I think they've done a few things. They've had McIntyre beat Orton clean at SummerSlam, so that gives McIntyre a little bit of a I'm better than you situation. They've had Keith Lee beat Orton, so that kind of gives Orton an opponent if he wins the title. And 3, this is an ambulance match, so you can do some sort of screw job that kind of keeps McIntyre fresh. But I mean, I thought their SummerSlam match was all right. I didn't think it was terrible, and I didn't think it was great. So yeah, I don't know.
I kind of enjoy. I think I enjoyed their SummerSlam match a little bit more than you did. It was a nice kind of down and dirty fight style of match. And credit to Randy Orton. I think we've said it about him for years. When you give him something that he enjoys and that he can sink his teeth into, he typically delivers. Other times when he doesn't care, it's obvious when he's sleepwalking through stuff. And I think he's enjoying working with Drew. So you're getting a little bit better version of Randy Orton than you would say when he was at the U.S. title level and he clearly didn't give a shit. Or when he was working with Bray Wyatt and he clearly hated the angle and just kind of sleptwalked through the matches. So, yeah, I'm with you. I say Randy Orton wins.
Yeah. So 2 things. One, I feel bad for Drew McIntyre for being the champion during the pandemic.
Oh yeah.
But 2, I do want to give credit to Randy Orton, but I also want to give I want to throw shade at everybody who's fucking stupid about Randy Orton. So recently, Randy Orton started cutting promos like a normal fucking human being, and he started speaking correctly, and people were like, "Oh, Randy Orton's really improved his promos. Yeah, this is better than I've ever seen from Randy Orton." And everybody was like, "This is cool," and Randy's like, "Oh, when you get to a certain point, you just promos are what you really got to work on." And I'm fucking tearing my hair out saying what the fuck? Patrick and I know this because we have eyes and a fucking working brain and can remember shit. Randy Orton used to talk like a normal human being all the time. You can go see his RNN updates from 2003 or when he was in Evolution. He was or when he was a Legend Killer. He was a normal fucking person. But for some reason in 2007, or 2008, I don't really know what it was, but he started talking at 1/4 the speed, and everybody started jerking him off and saying Randy Orton's psychology is amazing. This his promos, so much psychology. And it's okay, first of all, Jake Roberts didn't have great psychology because he fucking spoke slowly. There's intention and there's context and more than just voice speed. Second of all, Randy Orton sounded like a freaking weirdo robot for 12 or 14 years. And it's like, he was terrible. Like Randy Orton's promos, like for 10 years were like the worst ever. But
Randy
nobody
Borton?
like, go ahead.
Randy Borton.
Yeah. I mean, and like people didn't call him out. They would just say he's got great psychology. And I'm like, what? And like smart people like Bret Hart would be like, oh boy, Randy's like one of the heels that really gets it. And you're like, what? Doing what? What is he doing? And like, I don't think Randy Orton doesn't have talent. I think Randy Orton's match with Mick Foley at Backlash 2004 is fantastic. I think his match with Shawn Michaels at Unforgiven 03 is great. I think Randy Orton had a lot of really good matches in his career, but there's a huge period of time where Randy Orton decided to be like a fucking non-human person. And I don't mean like The Undertaker where he's like supposed to be, but just like fucking odd and was terrible. And now he's decided to join us in the realm of the living. And we're like, oh yeah, he can talk like a normal human. And everybody's like fucking forgetting this long held opinion that he had great quote unquote psychology for however long.
Well, Erik, he had IED during that period, so he was selling the fact that he had a mental disorder.
Let me tell you something. That storyline was the fucking microcosm of WWE. There's a hint of something good there, and the rest of it's garbage. Like, so, like people remember two things about that like build to WrestleMania. They remember Randy kicking Vince in the head, and they remember him doing the thing to Triple H while Triple H is and kissing Stephanie and stuff. Like that's the two things they remember. Here's what they forget. They forget that right after Randy Orton was a super badass and kicked Vince in the head, he immediately like grabbed himself and like apologized and was like sad, and it ruined the whole fucking thing. Like basically, I'm not a genius writer or anything, but like here's how this story goes: Randy punts Vince's head off, and like. And is happy about it. Vince is like knocked out in the hospital for a few days. Randy wins the Royal Rumble. Vince was gonna fire him, but he's now won the Royal Rumble and he doesn't want to jeopardize the main event of WrestleMania. That's the fucking story. Not that Randy's suing because he has IED and he's being discriminated against. That's not the fucking story. And then here's the other part you forget what happened. The fact that Shane McMahon and his baby punches beat the shit out of Randy Orton the next month. So anything good that came from that, like any like badassery from Randy Orton, was ruined by the fact that Randy was a whiny little bitch about his IED. And then right after that, Shane McMahon beat the shit out of him.
Are you saying that Shane McMahon's not a tough guy?
I can't tell you how many times Shane has ruined angles where you're building up a guy to be tough, and they're like, let's have him fight Shane for no reason. Do you remember Kane? Remember when Kane had like a competitive 4-month feud with Shane McMahon?
Yep. Right after he unmasked, which I actually liked initially for a while, for like the first few weeks, and then Shane had to show up and kind of ruined it.
Well, and also didn't like Austin like stun him?
If he did, I don't remember it.
Well, you played right into Vince's hands there. Yeah, no, he beat RVD because they were in a team, and then he feuded with Shane, and it was like fucking ridiculous. And like Shane was like competitive. It's like Shane always has to be competitive. I don't understand. Like, I mean, I guess I do understand. He's the boss's son, and he wants to be like cool and tough and shit. But like in reality, sure, are you trying to build up Kane or are you trying to build up Shane McMahon? Like, it's weird to me that like I feel like when you build a monster character, those first like few months are so critical to how it comes off. And like they like did him dirty like they always do. Like compare that to 97, 98 Kane. He first he takes out Undertaker, then he like kills everybody like interfering in matches. Then he beats Mankind clean. He beats Vader clean. He's like stomping through everyone, and then Undertaker beats him, but that's like six months later, you know?
Mm-hmm. And, you know, Shane McMahon, personally, I felt like he was at his best when he was the spoiled little brat that was hopping around and running away, and which way did he go? And he was the guy that you love to see get his ass kicked. And when Rock would beat him up, it was satisfying. When Big Show got his hands on him, it was satisfying. That was the Shane
Blackman
McMahon.
like threw him off the Titantron.
Yeah, that type of stuff. It was fun. And he was like a fun Weasley character that you enjoyed watching get his ass kicked. And I think maybe it was that match with Kurt Angle, but even that one, people forget, like, the part of the story where he made it so
He's
that
not
Kurt
competitive with Kurt Angle.
Yeah, well, he made it so that Kurt had to wrestle twice earlier in the night, so that by the time he got to Shane, Kurt was already, blown up from working 2 matches. So even with that match, he had to be strategic about it. And like you said, Kurt Angle dominated most of that match anyway, but somehow that match changed the perception of Shane, and for the worse, unfortunately.
Yeah, okay, so that's Clash of Champions. It should be a perfectly cromulent show.
Nice, I like that.
All right, so why don't we talk, you want to talk Raw, specifically Retribution?
Oh yeah, let's get into that. The thing that everybody was talking about after Raw was over, and it's worth talking about because it's one of the. I mean, we had already talked about it on a previous episode about how they pretty much already botched Retribution with all the things that they did, but now we get to the reveal of the key members of the group, and to say it was, I don't want to say let down because my expectations were low anyway, but you can't do a mystery group with people under a mask because that just raises expectations that it's going to be some kind of a big name or something. Like I think I said on an earlier episode, it's like the only way this can work is if Punk's behind everything because the story would practically write itself. But it ended up just being a bunch of NXT guys like Dominik Dijakovic and Mia Yim and those people. And
they're not Dijakovic or Mia Yim.
No, they've got new names. They've got they've christened them with new names similar to Ben Stiller or White Goodman, I should say, his Purple Cobra's dodgeball team, Blade, Laser, Blazer, and all kinds of Azers. They've got. Go ahead.
I was just saying the woman's name that he says when he's introducing his team, Inga Katinka Unka.
Yeah,
Stella. I can't remember what it actually was.
I can't remember her name either, but yes. And of course, when I first heard their names, like T-Bar, Mace, and Slapjack, which are the names of the male members, Dominik Dijakovic, which in of itself is a cool name, and they change him to T-Bar. And I hear these names, and immediately what pops up in my head are like Decepticon names from Generation 1, but not like the early years of Transformers Generation 1, like the later years when you got into the Action Masters and the Pretenders, and they ran out of names for these guys, so they just started coming up with random crap like T-Bar and Mace.
It reminds me of like Titty Bar.
Kind of, yeah. It sounds like it.
Yeah. It's like I'm all for like a show encompassing overarching angle. Like that's fine, but like first of all, do it right. Don't have them like Raw exclusive and like not make any sense and like here's this radical terrorist group and we're gonna run promos for them on our show. Like, I mean, like and then the response is like Vince is like, well, how do you do that? Well, you gotta figure it out. That's what you've got 900 writers for. Like the NWO paid for time, like with Turner, so like that made sense. And then they're like, where are they getting the money? Oh, it's Hogan and I mean Hogan has money and millionaire Ted DiBiase was part of it. So like it makes sense. You have to actually tell a story. It can't just be guys are coming in and then we're gonna want to see them fight other guys and that's it. It's like it's very bad.
Vince is not much of a nuanced guy, and like we said with the Matt Hardy situation from 2005, the show opened up this week with them saying that like, they have been signed to contracts with WWE, and it's like,
why did you sign them?
What'd you say?
Why would they sign them?
I have no idea. It doesn't make you're right. It makes absolutely no sense. Oh, these terrorists that have been destroying our programming for a month. Yeah, let's give them contracts.
Yeah, I respect what you've done. Yeah, here's a contract. Put her there, pal.
And then they get into the main event. There's a 6-man tag main event, and they lose the match by disqualification, but they still lost. And it's like that's a terrible way to.
No, Patrick. In WWE, count out and disqualification, wins and losses don't count. It doesn't matter, because if a heel says, "Oh, you know what? I'm gonna take this loss," he still fucking loses. I don't like thankfully AEW pushes the pay window so much, and JR talks about the pay window, because you forget what the fuck are they doing? If you've only watched WWE, your concept of wrestling is that it just happens. But in the old days, and I sound like a fucking old idiot, but I don't mean to, but originally, I'll say that makes me sound less old, but originally the idea is that they're fighting, and in a boxing match or a UFC fight, the winner gets a larger share of the purse, and you go to the pay window and you're like, I won, so give me the purse for my fight. And they're like, okay. And that's why you're doing it. You're fighting because it's your fucking job, and if you're good at it, you can make a lot of money. In WWE, they're there to just entertain, and if you win or you lose, it doesn't matter, so who gives a shit? When I watch AEW and they're like, John Moxley's 17-0, you're like, holy shit, that guy seems good. I mean, I know it's fake, but I also know that I know Marvel's fake, but if I've seen Captain America kick 19 guys' asses, I know that he's pretty tough, and I expect him to beat up most people.
Yeah, absolutely. And even the Rocky movies, the first one opens up with him beating Spider Rico, and they're splitting their pay in the back. That's literally the first thing in the movie.
Yeah.
And
this is what happens when you sports entertainment-fy everything.
Yeah, and Vince isn't much on nuance. I mean, we didn't talk about it, but the Zelina Vega Asuka match, apparently Zelina Vega gets a title shot just by saying, gimme, gimme.
Yes. I mean, these are all the things that, I think, hamper wrestling as, at its foundation. Because I remember being a kid, and, I liked the late 90s for obvious reasons, and I enjoyed it, but there was a lot of stuff that, chipped away at your suspension of disbelief. Patrick and I have talked about in the past, but if you can get a title shot just by saying, hey, I'm going to fight with you and call you out, why doesn't every person just do that? And and there's situations where okay, if the NWO or whoever, they don't want to lose their title, then they can just have everybody interfere every match and win by DQ. So you have to acknowledge that shit. You have to I mean, actually Kevin Nash makes a great point. He says, the Sting Hogan match in Starrcade 97, he's like, I would have put it in a cage, because he's like, we wouldn't have let that happen. We wouldn't have let the title change hands. And he's right. You've established a group that's going to cost you matches, and you need to find a way to stop that, that, which is the point of the cage generally. But there's so many things that happened in the Attitude Era that now you don't realize it, because you've been watching not you, I mean the royal you, but you've been watching wrestling for so long, but you don't realize how immersion breaking these things are. The invisible camera, so which I think is one of the most immersion breaking things WWE possibly does. I think it's probably the worst thing they do. I would argue that. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, the invisible camera is the idea that all these backstage segments happen, and we're peeking into their lives, but there's a camera that's displaying all this information on a Titantron for the audience. So it's the camera is invisible to them, but we're not supposed to pay attention, but you can see it in the arena that they can walk into. There's too many logical leaps, and it doesn't make any sense, as opposed to telling stories either out in the ring or in backstage interviews. I mean, that's a thing that nobody really did before WWE, and now everyone does it. And I mean, AEW's gotten away from it, but they still are offenders of it. But I mean, that's a thing they do that I think is so destructive. I mean, Patrick, what's your biggest WWE offense that you think is the biggest deal for people watching that has hurt wrestling popularity?
Well, the invisible camera is a big one, and that's one that they never fully moved away from. And it created, I can point to several instances where it created major plot holes later in the show, like Batista's turn against Evolution.
Yep. I hate. I'm gonna let you finish, but so I people always talk about Triple H and Batista as this major amazing feud that was built up so much. I'm like, I can't get away from the fact that the storyline hinged on the fact that Batista just was smart he was apparently smart enough to see through Triple H, but he didn't just watch the television show to see that Triple H was plotting against him every week. He hid behind a door, and then Triple H didn't see that he did that. So it's like I hated that aspect of it. But go on. I'm sorry. Go back.
Yeah, another example is when Lita admitted she was pregnant. It's like, I have to tell Matt. It's like, well, let's hope he's not watching on TV. Like Lita, that whole bit where she revealed she was pregnant, it just completely destroyed any ability I had to get immersed in the story they were trying to tell, because she just told everybody, like right there, what you kind of gave away your secret.
So do you think that's the worst thing they do, or would you nominate something else?
I will, for the sake of being different, I will say that another thing that really bothers me is the, and this is more of a general thing, but the overall format of the Attitude Era, whether it be the Evil Boss, which is one that they never fully got away from, or the whole idea of making a match while the show was in progress. That was something that started during the Attitude Era and had a purpose, because Vince was trying to screw with people, because that's when the Evil Boss thing was fresh, and he was trying to screw with Austin, so he would try to like keep him on his toes and put him in like these really unfair situations while the show was in progress. But it was one of those things that like really stayed around, and now it's like, we've talked about this, like they'll open up a segment, bunch of guys will pile into the ring, then they'll make a tag team match, playa, and that's your main event. And it gives off the impression that these people don't know how to put a show together. They just happen to have matches that just randomly fall into their lap.
Well, and it's also like the Evil Boss thing fell apart in 2001 because, probably even earlier, because like the whole thing with Vince and Austin worked because like Vince couldn't fire Austin because he could go to WCW. Like that's the whole like thing behind it, right? So like, once WCW is not a threat and goes out of business, who gives a shit? Just fire somebody if you don't like them. Why do you have to go through all this rigor? Why do you have to be like, oh, you can't get title? Like, just don't put them in title matches or fire them.
Well, he did lose. There was that first blood match in 1999 where Austin won, so he gets to have his title shots, and Vince should have been gone. We never should have seen. We never should have seen him again after '99.
Yeah, no, that was pretty much the end of it. And then they're like, oh, let's bring him back as a face in September.
He can win the belt off Triple H.
Yep, you got to do that. Yep. Nobody had a problem with that. Everybody had a problem with David Arquette, which was awful, which was terrible. I don't want to defend that. I'm not going to. But like everybody was like, no, this is fine. Vince winning the title is fine.
Somebody had a line, and I forget who it was, but when a company is red hot, they can do no wrong, and when they're ice cold, they do everything wrong. And I think what you saw there is like WWE was winning the war easily by that point and just dominating. And they were the red hot company, so all right, they put the belt on Vince. It was, over after a week, so who cares? David Arquette, it was at a time when WCW was basically already in its casket and waiting for somebody to close the lid, and that was just another flower on the casket at that point. And it just gave people more of a reason to rant against it.
I like that metaphor. That was fun.
Yeah.
All right. So so that's Raw. That's Clash of Champions. Let's go on to Wednesday night. The Wednesday Night Wars. AEW had a show that was not marred, but changed up. We were supposed to have a 6-man tag match with Moxley, Will Hobbs, and Darby Allin against Archer, Cage, and Ricky Starks. And unfortunately, Archer has COVID, and we had to change it up to Eddie Kingston and Jon Moxley.
It's very fortunate that, it's unfortunate what happened to Archer, and I hope he's okay. I hope he turns out okay. But it's fortunate that they kind of had a plan B just right there in their back pocket with Eddie Kingston saying, I was never eliminated from the Battle Royal, having a legitimate point, and now they could kind of play with that a little bit. And it's like, all right, this is what we're going to do. And so they had a justification lined up, ready to go, which I'm sure wasn't the intention, but it was fortunate that they had it.
Yeah, no, I thought it was. I really like the whole Moxley Eddie Kingston thing. Like I've said it before, I think Eddie Kingston's great. I think he adds a sense of danger to the show. I liked the some people might say, well, hey, you just said you didn't like show opening angles with WWE. What about this one? And this is different because the match had already been signed. They said, hey, you're going to have a world title match. And Eddie Kingston, being a loose cannon, comes out, and it's not like a thing that's set up. He just like walks out at the end of another match, and he starts talking shit. And then Moxley comes out, and they separate him, and that's it. Like, to me, that's a believable segment. That's a segment, and they like kind of get each other's faces, and it's like, and he's like Eddie Kingston saying, he's like, come on, sports entertainer. I'm like, this is good shit. Like, this is like, I'm buying this stuff. That's the thing with both Moxley and Kingston. I buy it. I believe you guys want to fight, and that's like half the battle.
Yeah, and Kingston, I don't know how much control he has over what he says, but I believe every word that he says. So whether it's all on him, whether they've got someone giving him bullet points, I know they don't script everything word for word like WWE does, but he's a guy that really excels and is at his absolute best when he's on the mic.
I would imagine he has a lot to say. I mean, because WWE system is designed so absolutely nobody will stand out. Because, like, I know everybody's always like, oh, AEW has so much better promos than WWE. I'm like, yeah, but it's not because AEW has the better talkers. I mean, they have good talkers, but the idea that they have all the good talkers and WWE doesn't. No, WWE doesn't allow its people to talk. Like, they give you like full scripts that nobody's comfortable with, that are designed just to make Vince laugh, as opposed to create good pro wrestling storylines and moments, and you get what you get. But I mean, like Drew McIntyre can cut a promo. I mean, like New Day can cut a promo. Like, most of these guys can cut promos. It's just like, are they allowed to be good?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And a lot of the times with the backstage interviews, those are taped earlier in the day, and we're getting like take 7 or 8. So those guys are just drained by the time that they get to that level.
Yeah. What do you think of the main event, the Moxley Kingston match?
I thought the match was okay. I didn't think it was like a fantastic match or anything, but it was again, we weren't expecting a title match on the show, so to get it was kind of a nice surprise, and it was fun. I like their verbal battle more than the physical battle, which might be, I don't know if that's a thing with Eddie Kingston where his promos are better than his matches, but for what it was, I thought it was fun.
I mean, they are. I mean, I enjoyed the chop fest. I thought that was really good. And when they were slapping each other, I thought there was some good like rough and tumble brawl stuff. I mean, Moxley's great, but he has a habit of like, I mean, and the same thing in WWE. He's never been the hardest hitter, as far as making his stuff look hard. So there's always that. But yeah, I enjoyed the match. I didn't think it was a home run, but I enjoyed it. And I love the post match stuff. I love Kingston's crew coming out and Hobbs coming out and saving him for a second, if only to get beaten down. I think that was like, I thought that was like good pro wrestling 101. It's like a heel faction. Like, they get their heat back a little bit. They beat the shit out of these guys. Like, I want to see them get their asses kicked. I thought it was just good stuff. I think for so long, WWE, because it's a quote unquote babyface territory, has gone the other way, that I think stuff like this is so effective and great. Now, I mean, I'm not suggesting you go full on 98 WCW and have the NWO beat up everybody at the end of every show to the point where you never think the heroes can ever win. I don't think you should do that. But I think it should be a nice balance of like 60-40 heels on top at the end.
Yeah, generally that's a pretty good rule to go with. Because if the heels get beat every single show, then what exactly are you fighting for? Like, what's the storyline?
Fandango.
Yeah, and even, the whole thing about WWE being a babyface territory, like, even back in the day, like in the Bruno days, like, they would do an angle with, like, let's say Larry Zbyszko, and then it would be a long time before Bruno eventually beat him, so they would get some mileage out of it.
Yeah, and it's funny because they're not even really a babyface territory now, because when they have Brock, he's, like, champion for, like, 20 years, and he's generally a heel, so...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I'm actually, if Brock ever comes back, I'm actually intrigued to see if they do anything with him and Roman. I never thought I would ever say that, but, like, what's going to be the dynamic there?
Yeah, that could actually be cool. Yeah, I know. Isn't it shocking? We're like, well, that could be an interesting match.
Maybe this time
they can play off the fact that, like, Roman, like, almost never beat him. and like except for that like one time, but that could work well for Roman's like heel character.
Yeah, absolutely. Or they could be tag partners and just tear through everybody.
Oh my god, that would be cool. 2-man power trip too.
Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah. Next we had the not next, but the next thing we're going to talk about. We had Brody Lee and defending the TNT title against Orange Cassidy. Now first of all, I did not love this match. Second of all, I was shocked of the point of it because I'm like, you're not going to have Orange Cassidy win, but like Brody Lee could just as easily beat up like Scorpio Sky or someone,
Yeah.
Like, so I'm like, what is the point? Was it just to pop a rating or something? Like, I'm just confused with what the point was of it, and yeah, I just didn't. I didn't love it. I thought it was like there were some miscommunications. And I like both guys. I like Orange Cassidy a lot. I wish they would have him wrestle less because I think he should be more of a special attraction. And I like Brody Lee, and I like what he's been doing character wise and in ring wise. And so this not clicking for me was kind of a surprise. But I also questioned why the match even happened. There was no build to it. It was the very WWE like of AEW.
Yeah, and that's one of the things with the TNT title where it feels like it's just whenever they do a title defense, except for maybe Cody and Brody Lee when they did it that one time, it feels like here's just a title match that we're doing, and this is it. And of course, all of Cody served a much larger purpose of setting him up to get massacred by Brody. But yeah, it feels like I don't know. They wanted to give Orange like some kind of an elevated opportunity after the feud with Jericho, just to kind of paint him as like a bigger star than maybe people perceived him as before the feud with Jericho.
Yeah, I think this hurts him though. I think this brings him down a notch.
Yeah, because he lost. So it kind of stunts his momentum a little bit. So I'm with you. I wish they'd use him less in the ring. I think it would be more effective for him.
Yeah, to me, I think you should just had before, like, and the Cody return was cool, and like, that'll be a big deal. But like, I feel like you just have Brody take out he beat Dustin Rhodes, like have him beat QT Marshall, have him beat Scorpio Sky, have him beat these guys have him beat Matt Cardona, have him take out those guys because you're not investing like the future. And I mean, maybe like Scorpio Sky to a small degree, but like Orange Cassidy, like I know he's like 37, but like he's conceivably have some more mileage in them as a major deal. I disagree with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it felt weird. It felt like kind of a misstep. There were points of the match that I did enjoy because they are so different from each other that watching their two styles kind of clash was kind of fun. But in the long run, this is a match that probably damages Orange.
Yeah. We had the debut of Miro, the best man, with hilariously awesome theme music.
Yeah.
And he and Kip Sabian took on Sonny Kiss and Joey Janela. I had a problem with this for a few reasons. Number one, I think Miro just should have squashed somebody, come out and crush a dude, would have been fine. And like, I don't mind the association with Kip Sabian. I do mind that he didn't get a singles match to kind of show off. And I did mind how fucking green and shitty both Joey Janela and Kip Sabian were in this match.
Yeah, my biggest issue here is that the match went way too long, and I'm with you. I wish they had just had, like, if I'm going to do Miro's debut in a tag match, what I would have liked to have seen would have been Miro goes in, absolutely just demolishes two guys. Doesn't have to be Janela and Sonny Kiss. It could be any two random scrubs that you throw in there. And Kip Sabian stays on the apron the entire time, just kind of making goofy eyes with Penelope Ford. And that could be like a gimmick. Like, that could be their tag matches where Kip Sabian never does anything.
Yeah, it's like the old Enzo and Cass stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And I would have done it that way. For them to have like a really long back and forth competitive match, it was like, what in the hell is going on here? Like, this is, again, another one of those examples where, like, I don't want to use the term 50-50 booking, but like, they think a long competitive match is better than kind of the smaller goals that they need to achieve, which is make Miro look like a beast.
Yeah. We had a segment that I really did enjoy. It was Tony Schiavone knocked on the Young Bucks' door, and like was super nervous because last time someone did that, it was Alex Marvez and the Bucks kicked him. And Matt came out and he's like, "Oh yeah, we've been jerks. I'm just gonna go out and say it." And then Shivani asked about FTR, and Matt became like an asshole again and smashed Tony's phone, and then apologized again and threw money at him, and then left. And I'm like, man, the Young Bucks are assholes. And like, I'm really into this like semi heel turn type deal they've got going. I think it's like. I think they've been doing a lot of great character work with both the Bucks and Omega lately, and like it's interesting to me because there's so many ways you can go with these things. And once again, there's so many matches. We talked about this last week that they haven't done. We haven't seen the Bucks FTR yet. We haven't seen Omega and Page yet. We haven't seen Cody and Moxley. We haven't seen Jericho Omega 2 yet. Like there's a lot of really big matches that they're waiting on, and I thought this was good. I thought this was one of two very funny yet very effective segments they did. The other being the Jericho MJF segment, which was Jericho talking. This was great, Patrick, and I know you know what I'm going to say here, but Jericho and MJF talked and they complimented each other, and then they were both like, "Why'd you call me a loser?" And because they watched the show last time, they watched each other turn away and say that because guess what? Pro wrestling is televised and you can watch it, and they play the videos like in the building you're in. So I like that they established that, and then their weaseling out of it was great. And like they're going to feud one day and it's going to be fantastic.
I can't wait for those promos. When they get to a point where they're legitimately hating on each other, I think it's going to be pure gold.
Yeah. All right, then we had Hangman Uno that was fine. We had so we're gonna get the less good member of Private Party taking on Jericho. I joke, but I actually like this segment. I don't think Private Party's great on the mic, but I think it helped them. I think like I'm not expecting them to be Rowdy Piper in their first few things. I thought they were fine. And I think this is good for them to help them develop. I mean, if anyone's going to help you improve and get better, it's Chris Jericho. So I thought this was fine for what it was.
Yeah, it was. It set up a match for next week. There was that little thing where did he say something like, "I almost beat you," and I'm like, yeah, well, I mean, okay, almost doesn't count. Like,
yeah, everybody almost beats everyone in wrestling all the time.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I almost won the Super Bowl. I'm sure Matt Ryan takes that solace with him to bed every night. Like, it's like, yeah, I almost won the Super Bowl. It's great.
That's like that. Remember that Jerry Lawler comeback? Hey, punk, I'll think about it.
Ooh, you showed him.
Yeah.
Your knees knocking, punk? You should be scared.
Yeah. What else do we have here? We had a decent women's match. Sheeta and Rosa versus Ivelisse and Diamante. It helps because it's probably the best talent they've had. Having Thunder Rosa there has helped tremendously. Like AEW's women talent has always been well below WWE's, and it's simply because there's something against the women. I mean, there simply is a smaller talent pool because for years there was one place to go and they treated you like you were a bikini, a hot tropic model, and that was it. So like nobody got into it. So like now, you're seeing women's wrestling worldwide, like improve and increase with talent, but like it takes some time. So AEW is just going to have to be patient and play the long game. But this was, they've had some good matches with having Thunder Rosa on Dynamite and having Ivelisse there as well.
Yeah, I think like creatively they still need to find like a direction or something to like be like a lightning rod to kind of carry, kind of like what Chris Jericho was to the Cruiserweight division in '98. It always goes back to WCW '98, but
yeah, always.
They're missing that thing still. But what Thunder Rosa has done is that the matches, like you said, they've greatly improved while she's been there. So at least we're not getting these green, poorly worked matches. At least they're kind of solid and respectable, which is better than what they were.
Yeah, and they have characters that are improving, like Britt and Big Swole and stuff. So I think they're like getting there. But let me ask you something, Patrick. you probably know what I'm going to ask, but the question that you ask AEW, that you ask yourself as AEW, and it's a difficult one because it's a question that, like, if this was easy, this person would be signed very quickly. WWE probably would have, but there's obviously character concerns. If you're AEW, do you sign Tessa Blanchard? Now, for those of you who don't know the situation, obviously Tessa Blanchard is probably the most talented unsigned woman in the world, I would say. The problem is Tessa has some baggage. She's notoriously difficult to work with, apparently. There's possibly something, a possible slur she said in Japan. It's hearsay, but we don't know. But it is something that, like, if true, that kind of stuff can hamper you, especially as AEW has positioned itself as a more progressive promotion than WWE has been. So, obviously her dad is there, but, like, if you're AEW, I mean, we're in the time period, Patrick, where, like, you can be canceled if you're like a company, a person, or whatever. I'm not saying that with any sort of like political positioning one way or the other, but what I am saying is there are repercussions to these things. Is Tessa Blanchard's talent enough for you to want to sign her if you're in charge of AEW?
Well, to add on to what you've been saying, she also had an incident earlier this year with Impact Wrestling where she surrendered the title earlier this year. So that kind of paints the picture of, like, okay, now COVID may have been the reason for that. We don't know. I have not heard her side of the story, but it looks really bad when they put the world title, not the women's title, the world title on her, like their big belt, their main belt. And she has to surrender it because she's not willing to work the show for whatever reason. Again, I don't know how much COVID impacted that decision. I don't know. But, it's really hard to say. It's very, very hard to say. Because I'm a fan of her work, and I've seen what she can do. Like, there was a period where she was the best thing in Impact across the board. Like, she's legitimately that good. Her and Sami Callihan, they were really, really good, both together and separate. The things I enjoyed the most on that program. And I'm tempted to say she's like the one talent they could get that has ability that is almost on par with what you see in WWE with, like, the Charlotte Flairs and the Becky Lynches and those type of women. I would be tempted to say take a chance on her, and if it doesn't work out, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But I'd be willing to take the risk.
Okay. I don't know if there's a right answer. I just have thought about it. It's been brought up many times, so there's it's something to think about because, like, this is a star-driven business. This is something where, like, you think, the TV audience has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. So, like, even if you're getting, like, 20,000 more people, that still matters, So, like, any sort of minor shifts you can make is worth it. So, like, yeah, and with talent needed, you need to, like, you need to make moves. So, like, I don't know, but I thought it was an interesting question.
Sure. Well, as far as the women's division goes, you're looking for stars. Who else is out there that isn't signed anywhere else? That's the thing. Like, you're constantly scouting talent, and you want to get some kind of a major source of intrigue for your women's division. Who would you get? Like, who's available right now?
I mean, not really. I mean, they had Kylie Ray. She left for whatever reason, is in Impact now. She could have been a major deal, but she's with Impact now. WWE has most everyone else. I mean, there's not a ton. I mean, you could scour women from Japan, but you've also got the problem with COVID of bringing them in, so, like, and you're probably not going to get them full time. I mean, we saw even before COVID the problem that Riho had. Like, Riho is a major difference maker as far as the women's audience in AEW. Like, I'm not a fan of Riho. I don't think she's particularly very good, but the fact is the numbers turned up for women when Riho was on screen. The problem was she was never on the show, and, like, they weren't getting much out of her. So you can import these women from Japan, but, like, you probably want to invest in someone you have control over. You probably want to invest in your Britt Bakers, your Shitas, your stars that you have, I think Statlander's injured, but those would be the ones you'd focus on. But so like it's interesting because you want talent, but you also want to build your stars.
Yeah, and that's always the kind of the balance beam that companies are constantly trying to walk on. And it's a tightrope to walk on because it's like you don't want to completely reject the idea of getting big names into your company because they can bring eyeballs, they can bring credibility, and a bunch of other things. But you don't want to neglect the guys that you've been growing naturally and organically in your own programming because there is that. There is that element. You want to prove that you can make your own stars too. You don't want to just rely on everybody else's, past stars and past accolades and things like that.
Yeah, yeah. All right, why don't we move on to NXT TakeOver 31? It's going to be on October 4th. So far, we've got 3 matches signed. One of them is, so I feel like I've seen most of these matches many times. I'm sorry, there's 3 matches. So I feel like I've seen 2 of these matches, and I feel like I haven't seen one. So the main event is going to be Finn Balor, that we think is going to be the main event, will be Finn Balor defending the NXT Championship against Kyle O'Reilly. This is interesting because obviously Balor was a guy that they said, hey, let's put the belt on the biggest star that we have because their initial plan was Karrion Kross, and now he's out, and that big push kind of went to Ciampa style land, and they got to shift gears. I think that's fine, and we're getting this kind of different match because for the past 2 years, you've either had Gargano, Ciampa, Cole, or basically one of those guys have been in the main event.
Yeah, and it adds a different level of intrigue to see another member of the Undisputed Era get a shot, and it's like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And not a whole lot of story between the last takeover and this one, not compared to usual takeover situations. So if they want to just create this kind of shocking, oh, hey, look at this different thing we're doing for, I guess you would call it a lesser or less built up takeover.
Yeah, it 100% is, because last time you had the SummerSlam one, and then the next one was the Survivor Series one, right? So you had more time in between.
Yeah, and not the case here. So if they want to do some experimentation, I think this is a pretty good one to do it with because you don't want to, I don't know, do another rematch or something or rush anything bigger that you might have down the road.
Yeah, then we got Io Shirai and Candice LeRae. I feel like I've seen this one before.
I'm pretty sure we have. But yes, I've talked about it before, and I'm going to sound like a jerk. I don't care. LeRae and Gargano as heels, I just don't like it. I don't know why. It just doesn't work for me. They don't feel natural as heels, especially Johnny. It's just... He feels like he's going against his strengths by trying to be a heel. I don't know. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Johnny, he's going to be taking on Damian Priest, your new... not your new, but your newish North American champion. We're seeing something for the first time in a very long. No, I would say first time in ever, really. NXT's getting to the point where their main eventers just don't go off somewhere. Here's what used to happen in NXT. They would you'd have your guys and you'd have your feuds, and they would have they would get to the top of the card and they'd be like, okay, bye, see you later. I'm going to the main roster. Ever since NXT has been on USA, NXT has pretty much kept most people. Now there's guys that Vince is going to want to take. Dijakovic, Keith Lee, Aleister Black. But there's guys that he's not going to want to take and that they're going to stay down there. Gargano, Ciampa, probably Adam Cole. Finn Balor came back down. So we're seeing now, they're probably going to be stymied. You're probably going to have the same people at the top, and it'll be interesting to see what they do with that, because previously kind of the energy that NXT pushes is if you work hard, you can get to the top. And that may not be true anymore because maybe they have enough people at the top of the card.
Yeah, it's very weird to see this, and that was also one of the things that kept NXT fresh. So just when somebody was starting to get a little stale or maybe overstayed their welcome a little bit, whether it be Finn Balor or Samoa Joe or Shinsuke or Bobby Roode or anybody like that, they'd get moved up to the main roster, and then it would freshen them up for the main roster. Not all of them succeeded, obviously, but it would add that extra little boost to Raw or SmackDown. And then in NXT, somebody else would move up and change everything up, and it would get everybody would benefit from it, it seemed. And now we're kind of losing that, and we're running the risk of NXT getting just as stale as Raw or SmackDown.
Yeah, I mean, because remember, forever the NXT title, there were no multiple champions.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was just like, I mean, I'll go through them all right now. You went Rollins to Big E to Bo Dallas to Neville to Zayn to Owens to Balor to Joe to Nakamura to Joe was the first one, and that was like 4 years into the thing. So like it took a while. And you had Nakamura, but then you go back and you got like you do Rude, McIntyre, Almas, Black, Ciampa, Gargano, Cole, Keith Lee, Karrion Kross. Like now Balor, so you got another one. So like you're seeing now in this in the USA era, just like the same names are like showing up again. You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's. Oh, God. Well, again, it's just further paints the picture that the move to USA and the move to 2 hours has kind of diluted what made NXT so special and so unique originally.
Yeah. All right. I think that's all we got for today. So, yeah. I want to thank you, everybody, for listening. This should be up tomorrow on Saturday, so I hope you enjoy your Weekday Warriors of Wrestling on the weekend. But yeah, we will hopefully be back here next week. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, retweet. All those things really help us out. We thank you very much. But for myself, Mr. Erik Clancy, alongside Mr. Patrick Kelley, we are
signing off.